Rivera: The Promised Land is a rather unique RPG that sees you taking up the fight as 6 playable characters, with the adventure taking much inspiration from Norse mythology and incorporating many of its concepts into the narrative. Now, the experience is quite linear. It doesn't really allow for much exploration and instead focuses upon a series of predetermined battles throughout the duration of the adventure. Because of this, there are no random encounters whatsoever, but for what it lacks in freedom, it more than makes up for in gameplay. Each battle is turn-based in nature and revolves around something known as the overdrive gauge. It's made up of various levels, and upon reaching each of them, the player can execute a variety of abilities that correspond with the level. As you would expect through the use of experience points, you can evolve and learn new skills, but due to there being no random encounters, you'll soon find yourself unable to take on enemies due to your lack of strength. This is where the training mode comes into play, which allows you to hone your skills and level up outside of the main campaign. Overall, Rivera: The Promised Land is a solid RPG that will not likely satisfy everyone, but for those willing to look past some of the game's shortcomings, you'll find a rewarding narrative and adventure waiting for you. Lunar Legend on the Game Boy Advance is a retelling of Luna the Silver Star, which first appeared on the Sega CD in '93. Having the option to play this classic adventure in the palm of your hands was a real selling point, and it soon became one of the best RPGs on the system. Now, it's very much a traditional 2D RPG and sees players visiting a diverse range of locations and meeting various characters that help flesh out the world and the events that take place. Once in battle, it takes on the tried and tested turn-based formula, with a ton of attacks, magical abilities and summons being afforded to the player. The combat system soon becomes a real highlight of the experience, and is easily one of the best out of the range of RPGs on handheld. The Game Boy Advance version sees a new addition known as Arts, which are essentially this game's version of limit breaks and allow you to perform powerful attacks and really come in handy throughout the journey. During battle, you have a gauge that slowly fills upon successfully carrying out attacks, and once it's full, you can then unleash it upon your enemies. Lunar Legend might lack some of the technical marvels of its big console brothers, but that does not prevent the game from being a satisfying experience that fans of the genre will surely enjoy. Sword of Mana is essentially a remake of Final Fantasy Gaiden that released on the original Game Boy in '91. It introduces many new elements and mechanics that help separate it from the original, as well as receiving a graphical update that manages to bring the world to life in a new and visually pleasing way. As the player, you have the choice of choosing a male or female protagonist, with both of the stories running parallel to each other, which often sees them teaming up to take on the variety of challenges that lie ahead. As for the basic gameplay, it's your typical action RPG, with combat taking place in real time, much like in Secret of Mana. You hack and slash your way through the dozens of enemies you encounter on the journey, with several weapons at your side, like the sword, axes, bows or spears, and choosing your weapon isn't just a mundane decision, since you'll find out that each enemy is more vulnerable to a certain weapon than to another. This really comes into play during some of the boss encounters that litter the experience. Each of them are meticulously designed both visually and mechanically, which requires a lot of strategy on behalf of the player to take them down. Sword of Mana is no doubt one of the best action RPGs on the handheld, which well and truly deserves a playthrough. Sword Knight shares much in common with the likes of the Tales series. It sees you filling the role of a young boy named Kleru, who dreams of becoming part of a group of renowned knights known as Craft Lords. To be honest, it's rather cliche and does nothing to stand out from RPGs of the past, but for what it lacks in story, it more than makes up for in gameplay. This is where the combat system comes in, and it's quite easily the most appealing aspect of the game. Much like the Tales series, it's all presented in real time and takes place upon a 2D plane. As the player, you have many options at your disposal that make encounters all the more manageable, such as the prime aspect of the battling system, which is the inclusion of 4 separate elemental types that play a huge role in your approach. Each enemy is usually weak to a specific element, and with the ability to carry up to 3 different weapons in battle, you'll be able to switch on the fly if your current selection is not up to the task. One of the main focuses of the game that plays into each battle as well is the ability to forge weapons. Throughout the adventure, you'll be collecting various materials either within the world or from the huge variety of shops that can be combined to create some truly devastating weaponry. It's a really cool system and allows you to experiment in many different ways. Summon Night managed to pass by many upon its release, so if you never got round to it back in the day, now would be the perfect time to try it out for yourself. Mario is no stranger to the world of RPGs. With the likes of Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario, there are plenty of experiences available, but one that really stands out on the Game Boy Advance is Mario and Luigi's Superstar Saga. As you would expect, Princess Peach is being kidnapped for what seems like the millionth time, but this time around it's not by Bowser, but an evil witch known as Cackletta. Mario and Luigi set out to save her and travel the entire kingdom to hopefully return her safely home. Now, as with most RPGs, the game is largely split up into two separate styles, with the first seeing you exploring the diverse range of environments and the second being the combat, which is easily the most engaging and rewarding aspect of the adventure. It's all turn-based in nature and sees you utilizing a range of abilities from your trusty stomp to weapon-based attacks with your hammer, but thanks to the leveling up system and items known as badges, you can constantly develop and unlock new and exciting moves that level the playing field when encountering enemies. These attacks are often referred to as bro moves, which see Mario and Luigi teaming up and unleashing more powerful abilities that light up the screen in style. Now, visually, the experience has a playful and charming tone that will resonate with fans of the series and lends the overall adventure a jolly nature. With the range of RPGs available on the handheld, Mario and Luigi stands as a truly unique journey that will not only satisfy newcomers, but longtime fans of the genre as well. Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones was the third and final title to be developed for the GBA. It sees you taking on the part of Erica and Ephraim as they set out to gather allies in the hope of bringing an end to the conquest of the game's main villain Grado. As you build your group of allies, you will come into contact with an impressive amount of diverse units that all have their own distinct role to play on the battlefield. From ranged to melee masters and magic users, there are plenty of options when it comes to taking on the hordes of enemies you'll be encountering. Unlike the previous games in the series as well, The Sacred Stones is a far more open-ended adventure, as you are no longer locked into a specific path of progression on the world map. As the player, you have the freedom to choose how the journey plays out, which really helps the game excel. Another new addition was the introduction of shops, which naturally allow you to purchase a wide array of items and weaponry that can help out during the more challenging moments of the adventure. Now, visually, it's quite impressive on the small screen, especially the battle sequences, which add a lot of character to each enemy and ally sprite, with a ton of animations that help them come to life. If you were on the lookout for a Fire Emblem game on the GBA, The Sacred Stone represents the best of the best. Starting out life on the PlayStation 2, the Kingdom Hearts series has always had a special place in my heart. It mixes elements from both the worlds of Square Enix and Disney to create one of the finest action RPG franchises to date. Chain of Memories sees players once again taking on the role of Sora and takes place right after the events of the first game. Much like the home console counterparts, the game is largely split up into two different styles. One will see you traversing the range of unique environments that make up the adventure, whilst the other will see you neck deep in some of the most engaging battles you'll find from any RPG on the system. Unlike previous entries, the battle system in Chain of Memories largely revolves around the use of various cards. These cards grant the player many different abilities, from basic attacks to magic and powerful summons that have the potential to devastate the enemy. There's a lot of nuance to the system as well. You have the option of combining several cards that results in unleashing even more powerful attacks. Investing in each of them early on is a good idea and will ensure your success throughout the entire game, especially during some of the more impressive boss encounters, which in my opinion are the real highlight of the adventure. If you haven't got around to it and are looking for a neat RPG to play on the GBA, Chain of Memories is a great option. Final Fantasy VI is quite easily one of the finest RPGs ever made. It's rare that nearly every aspect of a game, from the narrative to the visuals and the music, all come together to create such an unforgettable experience. At the center of it all is the top-notch battling system, with each character possessing their own unique special skills, which help deal with the various situations the adventure throws at you. Basic attacks and magical abilities all make the cut, as well as an impressive range of summons that keep battles moving along at a brisk pace. But the real star of the show is the Esper system, which stand in for summons in this entry of the franchise. There's a huge amount available throughout the journey, and several which are hidden that can be acquired through completing the generous amount of side content that accompanies the main campaign. They all soon become essential to progressing through the game, especially for some of the more challenging situations towards the end of the experience that will test even the most proficient of players. If you never got round to playing it on the Super Nintendo, or are just simply looking for an engrossing RPG on the Game Boy Advance, Final Fantasy VI is a solid choice and will not disappoint. Pokemon Emerald represents the culmination of the series on the Game Boy Advance. If you're at all familiar with the series, you'll know exactly what to expect. You start out small and gradually build a team of lovable Pokemon as you explore and visit the various locales that make up the region of Hoenn. The biggest inclusion is that of the Battle Frontier. It's essentially a gigantic Pokemon theme park where the focus is all on the art of battling. You only gain access to it after completing the main campaign, but it adds a wealth of content to the overall adventure. Now there are 7 different areas in the frontier, and each one of them offers a new way to battle. For example, in the battle arena you have only 3 turns to knock your opponent out, and in the battle pyramid your aim is to climb to the very top whilst navigating through a labyrinth of mazes, all whilst battling wild Pokemon. It's a really neat inclusion that manages to justify the game's release. Pokemon Emerald does its job nicely of improving on Ruby and Sapphire, and if you're a Pokemon fan you're going to love it. It's not so much that Emerald is flawed, it's just that it perhaps isn't exactly as big as an improvement as some would have liked. If you already have Ruby or Sapphire, you might find Emerald to be a bit pointless, but if the prospect of the Battle Frontier sounds appealing to you, then it is well worth picking up. Golden Sun has to be the most impressive RPG on the handheld. It sees you taking on the role of a young hero named Isaac as he and a like-minded band of individuals known as Adepts set out to free the world of alchemy. Their goal is to ultimately stop and protect the world from this destructive force, which will see you visiting a wide range of locations and meeting a lovable cast of NPCs that all add an extra weight to not only the narrative but the world that the events take place in. But it's within battle where the game really starts to heat up. The combat system is based around something known as the Djinn. These small creatures can be found lurking throughout the world and play a huge role in battle once capturing them. They can be attached to any of your characters in your party and provide a wealth of statistical benefits and ways in which to develop your character's abilities. It's a really neat system that adds an extra angle to the otherwise simple setup and easily becomes one of the best aspects of the game. If you're an RPG lover and have a Game Boy Advance handy, Golden Sun is one of those games that just needs to be played. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow us on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos. You can also join our community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. We'll catch you next time.